Well, this is quite a headline. This is coming from Forbes. Why it's scary when 0.15% of mobile gamers bring in 50% of the revenue. Now, this is a very old headline, but this data is coming from a company that I did more research on, and I do think this information actually matters when it comes to Marvel Strike Force. The name of the company is Swerve, and that Forbes article was based off of data from several years back, and this is the most recent information I can find from Swerve. Now, what is this data? This data is compiled from the following companies. Apparently, it's tracking 3.5 billion mobile game apps and processing 14 billion events daily, tracking purchase histories and things like that. One of the main companies here is EA, and as far as mobile games, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes is without a doubt one of the top games on the EA portfolio. Now, I found that this data is bonkers. Just like I said, that a very, very, very high percentage of revenue on mobile games compiled from these companies is coming from a very, very, very small group of the public. But not only that, they track the cost of the offers, and they are saying that offers that are over $51 account for 61% of the revenue. And as far as sales, it pretty much looks like Pareto to me. 20% of the players are accounting for 80% of the revenue for all of these games. And I'm going to guess that Marvel Strike Force is very similar, or if at a minimum, you know, the people over at Scopely have access to this data probably more currently than I have. This is just what's public, and I'm sure that this company sells this data to developers like Scopely, and I'm sure they have their internal data as well. Now, why does this matter? Well, because the other day we were talking about a comment that Batwalk made about Red Stars. I have been talking about the Red Star system and Marvel Strike Force coming to an end. And the reason for that is there's a segment of players, you know, these Krakens that are purchasing characters on day one and maxing them out. And I'm going to suggest to them that Scopely is getting a very, very, very high percentage of their total revenue from this small segment of the community. The situation with Red Stars is that when you have an Elite 7 and you open it and you get a duplicate, you're allowed to re-roll. And there's a group of players that purchase characters on day one that want to get their characters to 7 Red Stars immediately. They already have nearly every character in the game. And Batwalk made the comment, he's one of those type of players, before I maxed on Red Stars. That's right. Batwalk's Red Stars are maxed out. He has every character at 7 Reds. He was spending $260 per character. Scopely no longer gets that $260 per character from each Kraken. This is something that concerned me a little bit with the player's voice movement. It's been rumored that Scopely didn't even want to deal with free-to-play players at all with the movement, and the leadership over there at the player's voice movement pushed hard to include the free-to-play players' voices because Krakens are funding this game. And I have no idea what the stats are for this game, but when you have mobile gaming in general stats, where a very small percentage of the players are bringing in 50% of the revenue, it's going to drive the direction of the game, and those players are definitely going to have an influence. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I believe that there's an unwinding of the Red Star system in this game, meaning it's coming to an end because they're no longer getting this $260 per player. And that is a significant part of their bottom line. And so they're going to have to move on to some other progression system. And this is normal or mobile games. You know, it was orange gear, now it's teal gear, now it's green ISO, now it's blue ISO, and then there's 4 and 5 and gear 18 and so on and so on. The game keeps ramping up. And I know that Tana made a video about something called 10 stars. I joked about blue stars, but because of this and the importance of Krakens in mobile games, I do think that there's something coming or on the horizon. I mean, it's just the progression of this game, and we're gonna see the way that this plays out. Also, I wanted to say that the developers are hyper interested in Krakens and whales. And there was a speech made by a gentleman by the name of Henry Fong, who is a developer, and he's known for being a monetization guru in the mobile gaming space. And there was an article written up from his speech, which happened in 2019. I believe it was in Australia, at the GCAP talk. And the title of that was about making great money to make great games. And there's 3 headlines here that I just want to read. And it's about AI being used to identify whales before they even spend, or identifying whales in other games and then feeding them into games that they make a lot of money off. And if you think about Scopely, I know they make a lot of money per player off games like Marvel Strike Force. And my understanding is that Star Trek Fleet Command is also a very profitable game for them. And he was talking about maybe on some of the other games where they're not as profitable, they identify the whales and then they try to attract them to the other game. Is kind of what this was about, but they're using AI for this, and it's fascinating. And he says, about a year ago, I decided, what if I could teach AI to find whales in games? And then he created some software. He plugged in 2.5 years worth of data, and he found that after 14 days, the accuracy at picking potential whales after 14 days was about 87%. We think we can get it up to about 95%. And then it concludes with this quote here, and I'm going to read the quote, and maybe this gives insight to the way that and the reasons why things are the way they are in Marvel Strike Force. I think the context is a little bit different than the situation that I'm talking about here with Batwalk and 7 stars, but it's still interesting. I always used to think that if you monetize your audience too hard, they will leave the game, but it's the other way around. And the context for this actually was a little different than what we're thinking. He was more referring to like brand new players to the game, and he's talking about hitting them up with a lot of monetization options. And if you can get them to spend anything, they're very likely to stick around. But I think this is true in the situation that we're talking about here in Marvel Strike Force. One, the Krakens are super important to the bottom line of Marvel Strike Force. And the free to play, the cheap to play, even myself, who spent several $100s a month, is nothing compared to the players that are literally spending thousands of dollars a month. And that's what triggered this whole conversation, is they were talking about, in one of the games that I think he consults for, they were able to get $150,000 out of a player. And this was like shocking in 2019. But in Marvel Strike Force, we've heard reports of people have spending 4 times more than that. That's right, over 600,000. And that isn't even the top player. Top players may have spent much more than that. I have no idea what that number is, but the number is multiples, many multiples of over $150,000. What I was thinking about this is that the game is expensive because the Krakens will spend, and I've said this many times before, because I believe that Scopely is data driven. If they had a way of making more money by lowering prices, they would. It's really a function of this strangeness that I've seen in mobile games, where there's these extreme baskets of players, where there's free-to-play player or light spenders that don't spend enough to actually move the needle on the revenue. And it's very hard for the game developers to get players to spend that are free-to-play purists or that won't spend any money. And then there's the other extreme where people are spending, $150,000 of the game or 4 times more than that. And even myself, who spent more than $25,000, I compare that, it takes 20 of me to equal 1 Kraken. I don't move the needle. And my buying decisions and the way that I purchase a Marvel Strike Force doesn't matter to their bottom line, where it's probably a very small subset of the players that are bringing in all the revenue. And that is what Forbes headline is saying right here. Old article, but the data is still there from the company and it still looks the same. So what does this mean? A couple things. And I want to talk about something else. And because of this situation where a small group of players, in my opinion, are accounting for a large majority of the profits, I'm worried about Scopely making truly horrible decisions that will negatively impact the rest of the players. And one of the things that really bothered me in Galaxy of Heroes is having a 7-star requirement for gear tier 12. So here's a screenshot of a character that is stuck at gear tier 11, cannot go to gear tier 12 unless they get all of the stars. And I just think that is truly horrible. This post right here is 3 years old and it has almost 700 upvotes, which is a lot on Reddit for games of this size. Typically, any post over 200 is extremely notable, but posts that get up in this size mean this is a big deal for the community. And they've never done anything like this in Marvel Strike Force, and I don't think they will. But I got to tell you, this is something that really bothered me. Now, Marvel Strike Force and Galaxy of Heroes are apples and oranges for sure. My understanding is it's a lot easier over there to get characters to 7 stars than it here in Marvel Strike Force. But this kind of stuff drives me insane, and I really hope they never do that with yellow stars or red stars. Now, red stars have always been contentious here in Marvel Strike Force. This is a post from 5 years ago. You can see that I downvoted 5 years ago. It has no upvotes. I believe this is one of these negative posts, minus 1,000 or something like that. And I just want to read what they said about red stars and their impact on mission content. Going forward, we continue to tune PvE content to the needs of that particular challenge, but we will be using red stars as a more clear signal that the foes are generally tough. You may see red stars in some upcoming modes, include Fear the Darkness, which was later retitled Dark Dimension 1, and raids, but ultimately red stars themselves will not be determining the tune of the content, and existing content will not be rebalanced around red stars. And it's hard to hold them to this because this was 5 years ago. And, I don't even know who owned Marvel Strike Force at that time. I mean, when the game was launched, it was Fox Next. And then Fox Next was acquired by Disney. And then Disney sold it to Scopely. And now Scopely has been sold over to Savvy. So it's really hard to say, if this means anything at all. But I do want to say is that I really hope that the game continues to be free-to-play friendly, light spending friendly, even whale friendly, right? And not just a Kraken game. Because what good is this game if there's no free-to-play players and nobody's having a good experience? And there's just some absurd things that Scopely has done in the past. Agatha and Icarus not being farmable for over a year. For what purpose? Just to make free-to-play players and light spenders' lives miserable? The people that are funding this game bought the characters on day one. They're not extracting more money from us by making it miserable. And I don't understand why they choose to do things like that to make the large percentage of the community, the 80% of the community that's funding 20% of the game, miserable, where a very small percentage, 20% of the community is funding 80% of the game. I don't see the point in doing that at all. So I think that's the point of the video. I was just trying to, bring to light some industry data on the way things really are in mobile games. I hope you found the video helpful, and like and subscribe for more. Bye for now.
I should probably start to walk away. I'm hoping that you still make me have to stay, 'cause I'm floating in your orbit.